The Disney parks are full of mystical creatures, from aliens to ghosts to dragons to Chris Pratt. But time and time again, Disney has incorporated one specific type of creature into their parks: mermaids. Mermaids have been incredibly popular in storytelling for hundreds of years, and have proven themselves to be very versatile. Whether you're writing the classic dangerous mermaid that lures in men to kill and eat them, or a nicer mermaid who just wants to go on land and hang out with this dude, there is a lot you could do with mermaids. And their alluring and mysterious personalities and designs have drawn people back to them again and again and again. Disney's no stranger to using mermaids. They've appeared in several major films and franchises they've made, and the Disney parks are no exception. As in their 70-year history, Disney has tried to incorporate mermaids into their theme parks in a variety of different ways, with many great successes and many ridiculous failures. And in this video, I'm going to break down them all. Hello everybody, and welcome back to Uptown Funk. I'm your host Ty, and welcome to another Disney Parks history video. Today, I'm going to be giving you a comprehensive breakdown on the history of mermaids in Disney parks, from 1955 to 2025, breaking down every notable appearance of these magical creatures in the Disney parks. So, let's get started. Peter Pan's Flight was an opening day attraction at Disneyland, one that still remains to this day, its wait times as long as ever. Despite the mermaids having a pretty notable role in the Peter Pan film and mythology in general, they actually weren't part of the ride when it opened. While it seems they were originally planned, they simply didn't make the cut. Same with a few other iconic Neverland elements such as the giant rainbow. The only reference to the mermaids in the ride was on the mural when you were loading, which did feature a small image of a few of them. Now, Disneyland's opening day is pretty infamous. There were a lot of issues, and a lot of the park simply wasn't ready to be open just yet. Especially Tomorrowland, which had no rides and attractions, and basically just had brand showcases and experiences from Disney's corporate sponsors. Tomorrowland just was not ready. In 1959, a new ride would help turn things around for Tomorrowland: Submarine Voyage. In this ride, you would hop on board a submarine and go underwater, seeing many different things, from divers to fish to an underwater volcano to this thing. Absolutely horrifying. You would also encounter, of course, mermaids, which were featured pretty prominently in the ride and even made their way onto its poster. These mermaids were positioned towards the end of the ride and have sort of your classic mermaid design with their flowing hair and their tails, and they're all topless. YouTube, don't demonetize me, they all have Barbie doll anatomy. You would see them swimming by you and also kind of plundering through these chests in the lost city of Atlantis, which you also went to on the submarine. Very busy submarine ride, guys. By the way, in more recent years, one of the original mermaid plundering Atlantis figures has made its way into the hands of collectors. It's been put on display several times and was recently auctioned off in 2023 for an undisclosed price. This is easily the best look we're ever going to get at one of these mermaid figures. You could really see just how detailed it was. Oh, and don't worry, the sea serpent's been preserved too. But easily the most interesting thing about the mermaids is the purpose they serve in the story of the ride. See, while you're in your submarine, you have a captain talking to you as well as his assistant. And when you get to the mermaids towards the end of the ride, the captain starts to think he's hallucinating seeing them. And it seems that his assistant doesn't see the mermaids and advises him to start making your ascent out of the water because of it. Especially after you see that sea serpent. That's when it's really deemed that this guy is probably not seeing real things. So there's some interesting ambiguity there, and a mystery as to whether or not the captain, and by extension, you the rider, really saw these mermaids. But not only were there mermaids inside the ride, there were also mermaids outside the ride as well. As during the summer of 1959, Disney would pay female cast members to dress up as mermaids and swim around the lagoon. They would spend most of their time hanging out on rocks, waving, and occasionally singing to guests, but they would also swim around the lagoon, sometimes even near the submarines. While they were taught to swim a safe distance away from the vehicles, they were still swimming incredibly close to giant hunks of metal with active propellers, and one wrong move could end up in serious injury. But that wasn't the only issue that the mermaids faced. The water in the lagoon was incredibly cold, and the reason why the mermaids would sit on the rock so often was because it was the only place that they could stay warm. The mermaids had to work 4-hour stints in the freezing cold lagoon, and the overexposure to chlorine caused their hair to turn green. A similar thing quickly started to happen to the mermaid figures inside of the ride itself. Being underwater and that chlorine changed the figure's hair color. I'd assume that's probably one of the reasons why Disney uses bromine to treat their water now instead of chlorine. But not only were the mermaids stuck in freezing cold water for hours at a time, being overexposed to chlorine until their hair turned green, they were also constantly inhaling exhaust from the submarines that they had to share lagoon space with, which of course presented its own series of potential health risks. And as if all of this wasn't bad enough, there was the way they were treated by guests. The mermaids were popular. After debuting in 1959, they would return in 1965, 66, and 67. And there are reports of people being so fascinated by the mermaids that they would clog up walkways to take pictures of them in the lagoon. Almost like how actual mermaids of legend cause people to crash their boats because they're looking at them. But that's far from the worst of it, as there are also reports of rowdy men throwing money at the mermaids as if they were strippers, and some even trying to jump into the lagoon to flirt with them. Naturally, this disgusting behavior, combined with all the other things I already listed, led to the mermaids being permanently removed after 1967. Disneyland welcomed a few new mermaids in 1966 with the opening of It's a Small World. That ride featured a small portion with a couple of mermaids singing along, showing you that it's a small world underwater as well. They were placed right before the tropical section of the ride, and they even had audio that made it sound like they were singing to you from underwater, with their voices all filtered and muffled. It sounds honestly pretty scary, but pretty funny too. In 1971, Walt Disney World opened, and with it, a new incarnation of Peter Pan's Flight. Like many Florida versions of pre-existing California rides, Disney expanded on the original here, finally incorporating the Mermaid Lagoon and Neverland Rainbow that were cut from the original version. Early on in the ride, after entering Neverland, one of the first things you'd see were 3 mermaids lounging on rocks. The mermaids themselves were, well, let's just say, not very film accurate, with crazy hairdos in neon colors and, once again, no tops. They were completely naked. Again. I do not understand at all why they went for such out there abstract designs for the mermaids here. It was 1971, Peter Pan had been out for decades at that point, so why not just use the mermaids from the movie? At the very least, their poses and accessories do fit the mermaids in the Peter Pan movie pretty well. One of them is lounging on her rock laying down, another one has her arm behind her head holding up a seashell mirror, and the third one is playing a harp. It seems that by 1980, they were all given much more accurate designs, although it's hard to find a picture of them from this era. Another ride in Disney World that incorporated mermaids was their version of Submarine Voyage, which wasn't ready for opening day and opened a couple weeks later. While the original version of the ride was placed in Tomorrowland, its Disney World counterpart was put in Fantasyland, as by the early 70s, submarines were no longer seen as futuristic technology. It was no longer tomorrow enough for them. To help fit the fantasy theming, the ride was renamed to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea Submarine Voyage, now being loosely based off of the Disney film and Jules Verne novel of the same name. The narrator was replaced with Captain Nemo, the submarines were redesigned to look like the Nautilus from the film and book, but everything else, everything that you saw on the ride, stayed basically the exact same. It was just some retheming to help fit it into Fantasyland better. This means that the potentially hallucinated mermaids got to stay, and so did the sea creature, who was given a bit of a different design that you've definitely seen on a few Submechanophobia YouTube thumbnails over the years. One mermaid appears next to the sea creature looking at herself in a mirror, while two more are above him holding him on a leash, seemingly keeping him as some sort of pet in this version of the ride. Back in California, many of the classic Fantasyland dark rides were starting to show their age and needed some updates. So, in the early 1980s, all of Fantasyland was closed and reopened as New Fantasyland in 1983. The newly refurbished Peter Pan's flight included several new show scenes, characters, and effects, including, finally, the Mermaids. California's Mermaids were put in the same poses as the classic Florida ones, also using the new, more movie-accurate design for them, complete with seashell bras and better hair designs. The mermaid playing the harp was given black hair, the one lounging on the rocks was given red hair, and the one looking at herself in the clamshell mirror was given a blonde wig, making her look very similar to this mermaid from the film. And while this mermaid is a pretty solid match to one of the ones from the film, the other two really aren't. They're just a combination of wigs and props and poses that don't match any of the ones from the movie exactly. Their designs may be the same as the ones in Florida, but their placement in the ride is completely different. Instead of being one of the first things you see when you enter Neverland, the mermaids in California are crammed in at the way end of the ride and are actually the last thing you see before returning to the loading area. They're all perched on their rocks, and you can see Peter Pan's pixie dust covered pirate ship, that was very hard to say, flying off in the distance. The mermaids were later repositioned to have some of them facing the ship instead of facing you. As someone who's far more used to the Florida version of the ride, I always found the mermaids' inclusion at the end in California pretty odd, but now that I know they weren't there on opening day and were added later, it does make a lot more sense. At the very least, they were able to incorporate them somewhere. It was also around this time that Peter Pan's flight in California was given a new mural, prominently featuring 3 mermaids. A black-haired one laying down, a blonde one with a star in her hair, and a red-haired one with a ponytail playing the harp. So, not identical matches to the ones in the ride, but close enough. Now, Disney wasn't doing all that hot in the 80s. They had a pretty tumultuous decade, with very little going on in the parks, and very few movies that were big hits. One exception to this, however, was 1984's Splash, a movie about a man that falls in love with a mermaid. No, that's footage of the parents from Aquaman. There we go. The movie was released under Disney's Touchstone Pictures label. It starred Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah, was made on a budget of $8 million, and ended up grossing over $67 million, ensuring that it was a pretty big hit. And Disney's new CEO, Michael Eisner, certainly caught wind of this. You see, at the time, Disney was working on a log flume ride called Zippity River Run, and Michael Eisner, seeking brand synergy, decided to rename it to Splash Mountain. Yes, that's really where Splash Mountain's name came from. Despite being themed to Song of the South, Eisner wanted it to coincide with the movie Splash, and according to Disney Imagineer Tony Baxter, he even tried to get a Daryl Hannah animatronic into the ride, which obviously the Imagineers didn't want to do. I love how little sense Eisner's logic here makes, just because they both have vague themes of water. That's like putting Lightning McQueen in the Mr. Toad ride, because they're both cars. Honestly, I'm down with that. I'm perfectly fine with that. That sounds like a pretty good idea. To my editor, put McQueen in hell, please. One of Eisner's other proposed Splash brand integrations was a bar in downtown Disney's Pleasure Island section called Madison's Dive, named after the mermaid from the movie. This bar would have featured the return of live mermaid actresses, which would swim around outside. But plans for this place ended up being canceled when Disney went over budget, and that was definitely for the better. A place serving alcohol and mermaids that men used to throw money at definitely wouldn't mix. In 1988, Disney would release a sequel to Splash called Splash 2, which was made straight for TV and would release over the course of 2 weeks in May of 1988. Not only does the film heavily contradict the first movie, the two leads didn't even return for it, both being recast, with Madison now being played by... Is that Casey from Wings? The film was so poorly received that it's never received a home media release in the US, and there are no plans to put it on Disney+, which is saying something because Disney Plus has some pretty low standards with what it puts on sometimes. But Splash 2 is important to the Disney parks because it was actually the first film to fully be made at Disney's MGM Studios, which, at the time of opening, was an actual functioning studio, made to compete with Universal. Or, according to Michael Eisner, not that at all, what are you talking about? 1 year later, on May 1st, 1989, Disney MGM Studios would officially open to the public, and, in November of that year, a little movie would change Mermaids at Disney forever. We all know that The Little Mermaid was a massive hit for Disney. A movie about a mermaid that falls in love with a human man. The third time Disney did this in the 80s. The Little Mermaid ushered in a new era of success for Disney, that's now known as the Disney Renaissance, and plans to put the film in the park started quickly after its release. As part of Michael Eisner's Disney Decade Plan, a Little Mermaid ride was put into active development. Planned for a 1991 release, it was going to be a suspended dark ride where you're hanging from a giant clamshell, similar to Peter Pan's flight. The suspension now emulating you swimming instead of flying. Plans for this ride ended up falling through, as did many of Disney's other 90s ride plans, but in 1992, a Little Mermaid stage show called Voyage of the Little Mermaid opened up in MGM Studios, starting a monumental 28-year run. This show actually took the place of an insanely cursed Muppet stage show called Here Come the Muppets, which I definitely need to do a full video on at some point. These costumes are something else, guys. 1992 also saw the start of MGM Studios' nighttime spectacular, Fantasmic, which prominently features Ariel and Prince Eric, and still runs to this day, albeit with some of the scenes altered and swapped out over the years. Ariel appears in her mermaid form throughout the show, and at the very end, when all of the Disney characters are seen on a boat for the grand finale, Ariel can be seen sitting down because, well, she can't stand up, she doesn't have legs. This causes a pretty ridiculous problem for Disney, which has an equally ridiculous solution. You see, they shoot fireworks off of the boat at the end, and all the cast members kind of go back inside for safety. But Ariel can't, because she can't walk. So, it's the job of the guy playing Prince Eric every night to put a fire-retardant blanket on Ariel's cast member before this happens. This process, which has been nicknamed the bagging of the fish, happens every night during the show. And if you look closely, you can still, to this day, see Ariel get a blanket thrown on her, sitting there with it on as the fireworks go off. This is absolutely ridiculous, but it is Disney coming up with a clever solution to a problem. Granted, it is a problem that they made. I don't know why we can't just quick change Ariel into an outfit with her legs, or just right around the Fantasmic scene so that you have Ariel with legs instead of her in mermaid form, but at the very least, it is reported that Ariel's cast member gets paid more than any of the other cast members in the show because of it. As she should. The final notable event of 1992 was the opening of a new Disneyland park in Paris. And while I'll get back to that and the total failure of its opening in just a few minutes, for now I want to focus on their version of It's a Small World, which features one mermaid at the start of the tropical section. Just one. It's just her. She doesn't have all that much space. She's in a pretty condensed little area. There's even a guy riding the waves on top of her clamshell. Like, give her some space, guys. The release of The Little Mermaid would end up having ripple effects on Peter Pan's flight. Over the years, the mermaids in that ride had been changed and altered a bit, with their wigs being swapped out and swapped around every once in a while. At one point, the red-haired and blonde-haired mermaids would have their wigs swapped. After The Little Mermaid came out, cast members were apparently frequently asked by guests if the red-haired mermaid was supposed to be Ariel. So, when the Florida version of the ride went down for maintenance in the 90s, Disney cast members convinced Walt Disney Imagineering to replace one of the mermaids with an Ariel cameo. When the ride reopened, 3 new mermaid figures debuted. And while they kept the original mermaid poses, they now were redesigned to be far more film accurate. The harp player one now has a ponytail, the one laying on the rocks is now blonde, and the one admiring herself in the mirror has been repainted to become Ariel. Notably, these 3 mermaids have their hair molded onto the figures instead of separate wigs. These 3 mermaids, Ariel cameo and all, are still in Florida's version of the ride to this day. California's version, meanwhile, still keeps those original mermaids complete with their wigs. So in Florida, one of the mermaids is technically Ariel, and in California, one of them just has red hair. Also in 1994, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea at Magic Kingdom would be closed for refurbishment. It would end up sitting vacant for quite some time with no update on when it would reopen. That was until 1996, when Disney officially announced that the ride would not be reopening and would stay permanently closed. Disney was financially hurting at the time due to the poor opening of their Paris theme park Euro Disneyland, now the far more successful and far better named Disneyland Paris, and they had to start cutting corners in other parks as a result. Eisner decided to give 20,000 Leagues the axe due to its very high maintenance costs, as well as other factors such as its faulty air conditioning and the fact that it wasn't really accessible to handicapped guests. While allegedly Disney tried to find a corporate sponsor to help refurbish the ride, this was unsuccessful, resulting in its permanent closure. 20,000 Leagues took up a lot of space in the park. In fact, the lagoon made up 1/4 of Fantasyland, and with it gone, there wasn't really much to do in that area. In 1996, a new area on the edge of the lagoon called Ariel's Grotto would open. It featured a meet and greet for Ariel, as well as plenty of shady seating and some water-based activities for kids. A bronze statue of King Triton was placed inside the lagoon, holding his trident, which had water shooting out of it. After 20 minutes, we've reached the first mention of a merman in the Mermaid video. Congratulations, King Triton. The same year in California, a similar area was added called King Triton's Garden. Congratulations again, Triton. This time, the whole section was named after you. It featured not only its own version of the Triton statue, but also its own Ariel's Grotto meet and greet area. This lasted 12 years, closing in 2008 and being replaced by the Pixie Hollow meet and greet area. Ariel's Grotto in Florida was a nice little play area and meet and greet area for kids, so long as you ignore the abandoned ride on the other side of the lagoon. And when I say abandoned, I truly mean it. Disney left the inside of this ride to rot for years just out of view of guests. You've probably seen these very disturbing images online before. Over in California in 1997, a special plaque was placed inside of the Pirates of the Caribbean queue to celebrate the ride's 30th anniversary. It features a list of the original designers of the ride, and the border of the plaque features a skull and 2 mermaids. While mermaids are a pretty famous part of pirate mythology, this is the first time they were referenced in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. Their design here is kind of a mix between classic mermaid, the one on the right is even looking at herself in the mirror, something that we've seen many mermaids do in the Disney parks by now, but their outfits are also kind of military/pirate inspired. It's a pretty fun look. This same year, Disneyland's Small World would receive its first ever holiday overlay, with the characters now singing Jingle Bells and Deck the Halls during the holiday season. For their brief section in the ride, the mermaids were actually given a full parody of Jingle Bells to sing called Jingle Shells, which changes all the lyrics of the song to be ocean-themed. It's adorable. Disneyland's version of Submarine Voyage would close in 1998, with plans to turn it into a new version of the ride themed to Atlantis: The Lost Empire. Plans that were promptly scrapped after that movie bombed at the box office. For our next piece of mermaid history, we're going to have to take a break from the parks for a minute to instead discuss the Disney Cruise Lines. The Disney Cruise Line features a lot of shared DNA with the parks, and while I'm not going to go over every single mermaid reference on Disney's many cruise ships, there is one thing that I felt I really had to mention. In 1999, the second Disney cruise ship, the Disney Wonder, opened. Each Disney cruise ship prominently features a gold statue of a different iconic Disney character, and for this boat, their second boat ever, they chose Ariel. She's featured not only in golden statue form, but also in artwork all over the ship. It really goes to show you just how iconic this character is. Only 10 years after her movie came out, Disney felt she was significant enough to be immortalized as a golden statue on their second ever cruise ship. The first ship had Mickey Mouse. The second ship had Ariel. And while of course a lot of this is because it's a ship and she's a mermaid, it's really cool to see. In 2001, Tokyo Disney's second gate, Tokyo Disney Sea, would open. An entire park themed around the ocean, which many consider the best Disney park in the world. The park includes an entire land called Mermaid Lagoon, which is heavily themed to Ariel and the Little Mermaid. Complete with a facade of King Triton's palace, with no phallic symbols this time, don't worry. The land would mainly feature attractions themed to the Little Mermaid, geared at young kids, like Flounder's Flying Fish Coaster and Scuttle's Scooters, as well as a Little Mermaid-themed play area called Ariel's Playground. In 2005, a meet and greet area called Ariel's Greeting Grotto would open here as well. All of the attractions here are still open to this day. That is, except for one, and incredibly impressive stage show called King Triton's Concert, which ran from 2001 to 2014 before being revamped with a new incarnation in 2015. This is insanely impressive with a ton of aerial aerobics. Aerial aerobics, that was not an intended pun. Unfortunately, it closed in 2020 due to the pandemic and has not come back. While Tokyo Disney Sea opened very successfully in 2001, Disney's other 2001 theme park, Disney California Adventure, was not so lucky. Opening in February of that year, it was a weirdly, cheaply thrown together amalgam of strange California-themed ideas. At opening day, it had a restaurant called Avalon Cove, a seafood restaurant run by Wolfgang Puck, which had some mermaid theming on the sign and throughout. This was such a failure that Wolfgang Puck pulled out only 8 months later, leaving their partnership with Disney in October of 2001. Disney quickly pivoted, turning the restaurant into a character dining location where you could meet Ariel, eventually renaming it to Ariel's Grotto, that's the third time they've used this name now, and poorly editing an image of her onto the bottom of the sign. In 2003, Mickey's Philharmagic opened in Magic Kingdom, a CGI animated show where Donald Duck causes chaos in several classic Disney films, including The Little Mermaid. It's since opened in several parks around the world. In 2004, the 20,000 Leagues Lagoon would finally be removed after 10 years of just sitting vacant. And while Ariel's Grotto would remain open, the removal of the lagoon meant that the King Triton statue was removed as well. While Florida's version of the ride was now completely gone, drained after sitting vacant for a decade, California's version of the ride was actually able to escape that fate. While the plan to retheme the ride to Atlantis fell through, Finding Nemo's success in 2003 inspired Disney to retheme Submarine Voyage to that film instead. And so, Finding Nemo's Submarine Voyage opened in 2007 and still remains to this day. In classic Disney fashion, the end of this ride features a reference to what used to be there, as the captain of the submarine jokes that he'd better pull the ship up before he sees a sea serpent or has an encounter with a mermaid. And as this is happening, in the background, very hard to see, you could see a little mermaid made out of rocks, as well as a sea serpent made out of rocks. When Hong Kong Disneyland's It's a Small World opened in 2008, it did something that no version of the ride had ever done before. It featured over 30 cameo dolls from Disney characters appearing in the original country their story took place. Ariel and two of her sisters, these are specifically Adrena and Atina, were added in as three of the many cameo characters. A little flounder is there too. These were placed right before the tropical area of the ride, the same section where you could find the mermaids in the original Small World in California. In 2009, Disneyland would receive its own cameo character update to It's a Small World, with Ariel, Adrena, Atina, and Flounder taking over the pre-existing mermaid scene. And since they took over that pre-existing scene, The Little Mermaid cameos in this ride are really the least cameo-y in my opinion. They are pretty prominent and have basically their own little scene to themselves, complete with their own audio track. And while they did remove the kinda creepy, muffled underwater voices for the mermaids, they, at the very least, kept jingle shells, which still plays in the ride during the mermaid section every holiday season. Ariel's grotto remained operational until 2010 when it closed to make way for New Fantasyland, an area taking advantage of the massive space that Disney now had due to the closure of 20,000 Leagues. Disney announced that, as part of this expansion, a Little Mermaid dark ride would finally be coming to the parks, both in New Fantasyland in Florida and in California Adventure in California. That was redundant. While the two versions of the dark ride are identical, California Adventures opened first on June 3, 2011, under the name The Little Mermaid: Ariel's Undersea Adventure. It's a pretty simple Omnimover dark ride that retells the story of the movie with several animatronic show scenes. Ariel appears at several points throughout the ride, both in animatronic form and in newly animated CGI segments that appear on screens throughout the ride. Another merperson, King Triton, appears briefly at the end. When the ride first opened in California in 2011, Ariel's hair was twirled upwards in the Under the Sea scene, a reference to something that's done to her hair during that scene in the original movie. This design was heavily criticized, with many saying it looked really fake, and some going so far as to nickname it Dole Whip hair, or ice cream hair. In response to this, less than a year after the ride's opening, in May of 2012, Disney replaced Ariel's hair with a more standard wig for her, which is still there to this day. Also, at a later date, the CGI animated segments of Ariel were replaced with new hand-drawn ones, more in line with the original film's art style. This is probably the only time you'll ever hear anyone say that Disney replaced CGI animation with hand-drawn 2D. And you know what? I challenge you to find me another example of Disney doing that in the comments, parks or otherwise. Thank you. Also in 2011, the fourth Pirates of the Caribbean film, On Stranger Tides, would release, and mermaids were a major part of it. In the film, both Jack Sparrow and the antagonist Blackbeard are trying to get to the Fountain of Youth, and must gain a mermaid's tear as part of a ritual to get there. The pirate crew have to lure out mermaids and are violently attacked by them, with this film going with the classic depiction of mermaids being seductresses trying to lure in men with a song before killing them. They are able to capture one named Serena, and, say it with me now, a human man falls in love with her. This is now the fourth time we've seen that happen in this video. You know what? Good on this guy. Good for him, buddy. Good job. To coincide with this, 1 year later in 2012, one of the scenes of Pirates of the Caribbean at the Magic Kingdom was altered to have some mermaid references. Now, alongside a human skeleton, you could see a mermaid skeleton, not unlike some of the ones shown in the film. Also during the scene, the mermaid song from the movie would play muffled in the background, and if you looked off to your sides, you would have the chance of seeing mermaids projected into the water swimming alongside your boat. It seems Disney finally learned not to use real mermaids, and this time went with holograms. Thank you, Disney. Unfortunately, these projected mermaids were very faulty and didn't always work too well, and according to a Yesterworld video on the subject, there were even reports of people seeing Microsoft error messages in the water where the mermaid projections were supposed to be. That is incredible. And terrible. A far more successful On Stranger Tides integration was in Disney's World of Color nighttime projection show. On May 20th of 2011, only a few weeks after On Stranger Tides released, they extended the Pirates of the Caribbean segment of the show to now feature some parts themed to the new film, including the mermaids. This only lasted about a year, ending in June of 2012, where this segment was replaced with one for Brave. World of Color and other shows like it are always swapping out segments to be timely with new film releases. On December 6th of 2012, a screen-based show in Hollywood studios called The Legend of Captain Jack Sparrow would open, and it featured a mermaid as well. She appears on a screen singing the song from On Stranger Tides and trying to lure in guests. You could also see some other CGI mermaids off to the side. Guests are instructed to stomp their feet to drown out her sound. Several props from the Pirates of the Caribbean films would be on display here, including the mermaid coffin Serena is carried in. Don't worry, she isn't dead, but that's just what that thing is called. On the exact same day as this, December 6, 2012, the Florida version of the Little Mermaid ride would open. So, big day for mermaids in Florida. This version of the ride, called Under the Sea Journey of the Little Mermaid, is the exact same as California's, so I don't know why they have different names. Nobody knows, and the names are both so clunky, but anyway, while the inside of the ride is the exact same, the exterior is completely different, with intricate, complex rockwork and a model of Prince Eric's castle. You could also see a large pirate ship outside of the ride, complete with a statue of Ariel on the front, which is just a little morbid. At the same time as this, a new meet and greet area for Ariel would open as well, called, wait for it, you'll never guess what they called it, you'll never guess. What if I told you it was called Ariel's Grotto? No way! That's the 5th time they've used that name! At one point, the statue of King Triton that used to sit in the 20,000 Leagues Lagoon was repainted to film colors and placed across from the ride where it could still be seen to this day. For the record, California's Triton statue was also saved and now sits at the top of the show building for their Little Mermaid ride. After 2 years of operation, the Legend of Captain Jack Sparrow show would close in 2014. In 2015, after several years of the effect not working well, the projected mermaids would be removed from Pirates of the Caribbean, but the mermaid skeleton prop and the song playing in the background would remain. Sticking around in Florida, also around this time in 2014, Peter Pan's Flight received a new extended indoor queue, which features several paintings on the wall as you go through the Darling House, including one painting of the mermaids messing around in the water. I really like how this turned out. I think the art style is great, and I'm also very happy that they didn't sneak an Ariel cameo here. These are all just your classic Peter Pan style mermaids. Some of them are based directly on mermaids from the movie, some are original designs. Why the Darling family has a painting of Neverland mermaids in their house, I don't know, but I don't think you're supposed to think that deep into it. In 2016, Shanghai Disneyland opened, and with it, a new version of Pirates of the Caribbean, Battle for the Sunken Treasure. This ride is widely regarded as one of the best things Disney has ever built. It is visually stunning, a technological marvel, and it has this stupid hammerhead guy that works for Davy Jones who was impossible to kill in Disney Infinity. If you know, you know. At one point in the ride, you travel into mermaid territory, and a scene that's both visually beautiful and pretty eerie as you hear mermaids singing in the background before seeing a few CGI ones on a screen off to the side. That's right, a Pirates of the Caribbean ride finally successfully implemented mermaids. Congratulations, guys. Treasure Cove, the land that features this version of Pirates of the Caribbean, also features an explorable pirate ship called the Siren's Revenge, complete with a classic mermaid on the front of the ship. And while this doesn't appear in any of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies and was designed exclusively for the park, it still is a part of the lore and universe it belongs to first mate Joshua E. Gibbs from the Pirates films. And while we're still in Shanghai, I'd like to direct your attention to their version of Main Street USA, Mickey Avenue. If you look in the window of the Mickey Avenue barbershop, you might just recognize a familiar prop that used to be in a Disney ride. That's right, one of the hairdos they're advertising in the window is the old Ariel Dole Whip hair. That's where this went after it was removed from the California ride. Now let's move back to Florida's Pirates of the Caribbean, where more changes were happening to the mermaid scene for some reason. Around 2017, roughly 2 years or so after the mermaid projections were removed from the ride, a new prop was added to the mermaid skeleton scene. None other than the mermaid coffin prop. I would assume this is probably the same prop that used to be used in the Legend of Jack Sparrow show, now moved into Pirates itself since that show had been closed for a few years. But the Disney parks are no stranger to using real movie props in their rides. I wonder if the mermaid coffin prop here is the same as the one that was used in the actual film. Regardless, the mermaid coffin prop wouldn't last very long. In fact, none of the mermaid references in this scene would last very long. As in 2018, during a refurbishment to Pirates of the Caribbean, the mermaid coffin, mermaid skeleton, and mermaid song playing in the background were all removed from the ride, returning it to its previous form. Also in 2018, the Ariel's Grotto restaurant at California Adventure was closed as part of the Pixar Pier refurbishment. It became Lamplight Lounge, which is still there to this day. This same year, Tokyo Disney received an update to their version of It's a Small World, giving them character cameos just like Hong Kong and California had received 10 years prior. Now, Tokyo Disney's Small World was based on Florida's version of the ride, which never included the mermaid scene, and still doesn't to this day. So when it came time for them to add Ariel, they didn't have a pre-existing place to slot her in like California did. So they took this blank section of wall at the end of the sort of tropical Polynesian section of the ride and built a new Little Mermaid scene featuring Ariel and Flounder and 2 sea turtles. Unfortunately, Ariel's 2 sisters weren't included. This makes for easily the strangest version of the Ariel scene in Small World. It's also the final thing you see before entering the finale room. In 2020, several Disney stage shows and interactive experiences were closed due to the pandemic, including Ariel's Grotto and the Voyage of the Little Mermaid stage show, which had an impressive uninterrupted 28-year run. In 2023, a new meet-and-greet version of Ariel would debut to coincide with the live-action Little Mermaid remake. And another Ariel walk-around was created in 2024 for the live-action remake's animated Disney Junior spin-off, which is just called Ariel, because that's not confusing at all. While these two have had appearances, the original animated Ariel continues to be the main one used by Disney in the parks as a meet-and-greet in shows, in merchandise, etc. In 2023, as pandemic restrictions were lifted, Ariel's Grotto was reopened for meet and greets, but the Voyage of the Little Mermaid show remained vacant. While it seemed for a while that Disney was just going to leave the building to rot and not bring the show back, in December of 2023, they made the surprising announcement that not only would a Little Mermaid stage show return, they would be making a brand new updated version of it. This was supposed to open in 2024, but got hit with some delays, so we'll circle back to it in a minute. Also in 2024, the Fantasy Springs expansion of Tokyo Disney Sea opened. One of its sections is themed to Peter Pan, complete with a new screen-based 3D Peter Pan dark ride called Peter Pan's Neverland Adventure. At one point in the ride, you run into the Mermaids, who are messing around with Wendy. They encourage Peter Pan to join them, but Peter Pan and Wendy instead go off on a journey to rescue Wendy's brother John, who's been kidnapped by pirates. I swear, the only reason that kid exists is to get kidnapped by pirates. In December of 2024, Mermaids made their way into another one of Disney's most iconic attractions. Well, kind of. This month, on December 21st, a new Disney cruise ship called the Disney Treasure set sail. This ship includes a bar themed to the Haunted Mansion called the Haunted Mansion Parlor, which features several pieces of the ride's iconic imagery, as well as some of its own original story elements. The parlor is said to be owned by an ocean liner captain who fell in love with a woman who he found laying in the ocean as the sole survivor of a shipwreck. The two were planned to be wed, but the ocean liner captain mysteriously went missing right before the wedding, and now you and your buddies get to drink alcohol on his boat. The captain's bride-to-be appears in a painting on the wall of the parlor, alongside several other ocean-themed Haunted Mansion paintings. She's dressed in a wedding gown, but also has some very distinctly ocean-themed pieces to her design, like some seaweed still stuck in her hair. And in classic Haunted Mansion fashion, the painting also transforms, revealing her true form, you guessed it, a mermaid. These paintings are all on screens, and her eyes will actually move around every once in a while. This character is a pretty interesting combination of several pre-existing Haunted Mansion characters, all combined and redone to create a new character with a nautical theme. Her painting is clearly based on the woman turning into a cat monster portrait from the Haunted Mansion, while her character concept is an ocean-themed version of the bride character, complete with the same weapon of choice, an axe. And, at specific times at night, her painting will come alive and actually just straight up say the bride dialogue from the ride. The painting of her mermaid form also features a necklace with a small key on it, which correlates with a lock on a giant aquarium in the center of the room, which features her husband's hat in it. So this is clearly where she put the body. A second copy of the Haunted Mansion parlor will be added to the Disney Destiny, a ship launching at the end of 2025. Now let's finally move back to the parks one last time, as on June 5th of 2025, Disney Hollywood Studios' long-awaited update to The Little Mermaid show opened, The Little Mermaid: A Musical Adventure. The show retells the story of the iconic film, now with new costumes, new puppets, new effects, and even some songs that weren't featured in the original incarnation of the show. And that brings us right into the modern day. There you have it, guys. This has been the full history of mermaids at the Disney parks. Over the last 70 years now, Disney has had so many different ideas regarding mermaids. Some have succeeded, many of them have failed, and I hope you guys enjoyed learning about this as much as I did. This was so much fun to look into and research. Anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching. Let me know which of these appearances, rides, crazy stories is your favorite down in the comments. And the next time you're at Disney's Hollywood Studios, make sure to watch closely for the bagging of the fish. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye now.